The silver stars on his collar were absent now, replaced by a faded navy t-shirt clinging to a body aged by discipline. Gabriel Knox, 56 years old, a retired three-star general of the United States Army, had hoped the road to Lake Perrin would be quiet. A drive, a tank of gas, and then 3 nights in his uncle's old fishing cabin, no staff briefings, no eyes tracking his every breath. But here in St. Ridge, Virginia, the truth was different. The gas pump at Barley's Fill and Go squeaked softly as he locked the nozzle into place. The sun bore down, unkind. Dust lingered in the air like tension. Across the lot, 2 white men near a rusted pickup truck watched him longer than necessary. One leaned into the other and whispered something with a chuckle. Knox noticed, filed it. A lifetime of being a black man in command had taught him, watch before speaking. He stepped into the small convenience store. The place smelled of coffee gone cold and neon-lit plastic. The clerk, a balding man in his late 50s, bore a badge-shaped name tag, Marty. He looked up, and his eyes narrowed with something that was not curiosity. "Afternoon," Knox offered, placing a bottle of water on the counter. Marty didn't respond. Just stared. Not at the bottle, but at him. "You from around here?" Marty finally asked. "Nope. Just passing through. Heading to the lake." "You've been sitting out there a while," he said, suspicion sewn into his drawl. "Didn't buy gas." "I will. Just check the GPS before filling up," Knox replied, sliding over a $5 bill. Marty rang up the water slowly. "Folks around here notice things." Knox met his eyes. "I'm sure they do." He turned and left. That should have been the end of it. But through the dirty storefront glass, he saw Marty pick up the phone. 6 minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled into Barley's, blocking his path. Sirens silent. No lights. Just presence. One officer, Clint Red, heavy-set, buzz-cut, mirrored shades, moved like a man itching for a confrontation. The second, Officer Haley Grant, stood back, her fingers twitching near her belt. "Hands where I can see them," Red barked. Knox didn't move. His hands were already visible, resting on the gas pump handle. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked evenly. "Got a report of suspicious activity. Gonna need to see some ID." Knox reached slowly, deliberately for his wallet. "My name is Gabriel Knox. Retired General, U.S. Army. On personal leave. Here's my license. And my DoD ID." Red took the documents, glanced, and handed them to Officer Grant without interest. "General, huh? Lotta brass for a fishing trip." Knox kept his tone mild. "I'm not here for ceremony. Just solitude." Red's expression shifted. "Step away from the vehicle." "There's been no cause stated, officer." "I said, step away." Knox complied. 27 years in the military taught him that survival was sometimes the strategy. As he placed his palms on the SUV's hood, Red moved behind him and began a thorough pat-down. Unnecessarily thorough. "This constitutes harassment," Knox said quietly. Red leaned in, breath heavy. "The only mistake you made was thinking you belonged here." With that, he yanked Knox's arms behind him and cuffed him, tight. Click. Click. "You're making a mistake," Knox said. "No, General," Red hissed. "You did." Officer Grant looked uneasy. "Sarge, his ID checks out. That's a real DoD badge. I don't care if he's the Secretary of Defense. We check what we're told to check." Knox sat still in the back of the squad car, the cuffs cutting into his wrists, the seat hot from the sun. The air smelled of vinyl and bad intentions. His eyes scanned the dashboard. "May I use my phone?" he asked. "One call," Red sneered, reaching into Knox's pocket and pulling out a slim, black device. far too clean, too precise to be personal. He handed it over through the barred divider. Knox tapped in a number. Department Operations. Code Ravenfall, he said calmly. Knox. Send it up the chain. Confirmed. Ravenfall initiated. 500 miles away, Colonel Adrian Vale, 52, nearly dropped her coffee when the alert blinked across her Pentagon screen. Ravenfall, Live Code, Priority Alpha. Oh God, she whispered. They triggered him. Behind her, 2 junior officers stiffened. Run comms with Joint Command, Vale ordered. Patch me through to Watch Command and Admiral Kent. She paused, eyes narrowing. And start the obsidian pull. All of it. Across town in a small office, Mayor Clark Buckley, 61, watched the gas station feed through a secure camera system. His fingers danced over his phone screen. He typed a single message. He's in. He set the phone down and poured himself a glass of bourbon. The storm had arrived. The police cruiser rolled slowly down Main Street, its prisoner seated silently in the back. Gabriel Knox didn't speak. He didn't shift. He didn't protest. He calculated. Outside the window, St. Ridge drifted by, quiet homes, flag-faded porches, and streets lined with pickup trucks and generational suspicion. Knox knew this kind of town. It wasn't the first to size him up and decide he didn't belong. But this time, the decision wasn't just ignorance, it was premeditated. His hands, still cuffed, rested motionless in his lap. The military-issued phone had been returned to his jacket by Officer Grant at the insistence of protocol. Red didn't notice, or didn't care. His triumph was too loud inside his own head. "You're quiet, General," Red said, glancing into the mirror. "Where's that military bearing now?" Knox offered no response. His silence was curated, a tactical delay. The call he'd placed had set wheels in motion, ones Red couldn't begin to fathom. What neither man realized was that the gas station security cameras were routed to a private server, a server managed by a contractor once employed by the Department of Defense. And someone was watching. In a secured Pentagon briefing room, Colonel Adrian Vale stood before a table of decision-makers. Her voice was sharp, measured. Gabriel Knox initiated Ravenfall. That code hasn't been used since '06. You're sure it wasn't accidental? Asked Admiral Kent, steel-haired and sharp-eyed. No, Vale replied. He used the command chain structure. Confirmed identity. Code authenticated. This wasn't panic. It was strategic. Behind her, a monitor displayed a blinking marker over St. Ridge. Why would Knox be there? Kent asked. He filed leave for the Smokies. Because someone altered the routing, Vale replied. Because someone wanted him there. A younger analyst passed a secure tablet to Vale. There's more, she said, tapping the screen. We've intercepted comms traffic from a buried military node. Routing numbers tie to black-budget contractors once affiliated with Project Firehook, a sister program to Obsidian Fence. Admiral Kent paled slightly. I thought Obsidian Fence was buried. It was, Vale said. Until now. Meanwhile, back at the St. Ridge Police Department, Knox was led through side doors, off camera, and into a holding area that smelled of floor wax and old coffee. His belongings were tossed into a plastic bin labeled simply, Knox, G. Sergeant Red, chest puffed with authority, made a show of filling out forms. Let me guess. You think this'll be a headline? Some wrongful arrest story on the morning news? Red asked. Knox didn't flinch. No, he said. I think this is going to be a congressional hearing. Red's laugh was bitter. You overestimate your relevance, General. He leaned forward, pressing his hands on the table. People like you always think rules don't apply. Knox met his gaze, cool and direct. People like me? We write the rules. Outside the interrogation wing, Officer Haley Grant stood stiffly. She had joined the St. Ridge Force 11 months earlier, a rookie with idealistic notions of justice. But today, something felt wrong. Everything about the arrest felt off-script, forced, convenient. And Knox, for all his calm, had authority that rang truer than Red's self-styled bravado. She pulled out her department-issued tablet and began reviewing the arrest footage. Knox had been polite, cooperative, unarmed, unthreatening. There had been no probable cause, no warrant, no legal reason for escalation. Only Marty's call. And Marty had a history. Officer Grant accessed personnel complaints. Marty Donnell, former state trooper. Discharged after excessive force allegations. Multiple conspiracy posts online. Now working a gas station. She stared at the screen, dread pooling in her stomach. They'd walked into something bigger. In a modest office in Huntsville, Alabama, a man named Ezekiel Stroud sat watching a screen. He wore a tailored gray suit, and a crucifix hung beneath his shirt collar. The room was filled with monitors, security feeds, encrypted news channels, and one live stream from Barley's Fill and Go in St. Ridge. When Knox had placed his call, Stroud had been notified. The codename Ravenfall triggered every security thread he had ever laid down. He picked up the phone. "Activate Tier 2, he said. "Authorization?" "Stroud Alpha 8. A beat." "Confirmed. Tier 2 live." He leaned back, watching the feed. "Let's see how far they'll push the lion." Back at the holding room, Knox sat alone, deliberate, composed. He studied the room. 2 exits. One malfunctioning camera in the top left corner. No clock. No window. But a reflection in the glass door across the hall. His training had not dulled. His instincts sharpened under pressure, not numbed. The door opened. Officer Grant entered with a clipboard. "I have some paperwork, sir," she said, deliberately loud for the camera. Knox raised an eyebrow. "I need your signature here, and here," she added. When she passed the clipboard, tucked between the pages was a folded sticky note. "They know who you are. Red isn't working alone. Get ready." Knox didn't react. He signed where indicated, then passed it back with a slight nod. Grant walked out without another word. In a private office inside the department, Mayor Buckley poured himself another 2 fingers of whiskey. "You've got him?" he asked into the phone. "Yes," came the gravel voice of Colonel Nash Tyran, once a rising star in military intelligence, now a ghost in the system. "He initiated Ravenfall," Buckley added. "Of course he did. That's what I wanted." "You sure he'll play it the way you expect?" Gabriel Knox was always predictable. Honor-bound. Strategic. "He'll try to fight this with precision." Tyran's voice hardened. "And that's exactly why we'll destroy him with chaos." The room was still, but inside Gabriel Knox, strategy was racing. In war zones, he'd once faced down warlords, defused tribal insurgencies with a nod, a code, and silence. But St. Ridge was a different battlefield. It wasn't governed by treaties or tactics. It operated on whispers and deep rot. And now, someone had pulled him into the middle of something carefully staged. He sat in the holding cell, hands no longer cuffed, but still restrained, by space, by camera, by perception. Across the hallway, Sergeant Clint Red stood at the evidence desk, making a show of sorting paperwork he had no real intention of filing. "You comfortable, General?" Red called, lacing the title with disdain. Knox didn't respond. "You know, I've been reading up on you," Red added. "Commander in Mosul. Something about an ethics reform initiative? Fancy. What did you do, take away the good guy's right to hit back? Still no response. I bet the boys on the ground loved that, Red sneered, tapping his pen against the metal drawer. From his vantage point, Knox could see the hallway reflections, the glass, the monitors behind Red, and something else. A folder on the desk, unmarked, but with a strange insignia. A black geometric shape, a fence wrapped around a rank insignia. His chest tightened. Obsidian fence. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. A shadow program that supposedly had been disbanded after multiple investigations. It wasn't just a surveillance initiative. It had been a testbed. A way to monitor, manipulate, and sabotage rising officers of color, especially those who threatened the status quo with competence and loyalty to ideals rather than old boy networks. He had helped dismantle it. Or thought he had. Elsewhere, in a sunlit D.C. apartment cluttered with law books, Alexis Knox, 54, Gabriel's wife and one of the nation's most respected civil rights attorneys, was reviewing a deposition when her secure line buzzed. Not her regular phone. Not the firm line. The one-ring phone, only used for family-level emergencies tied to Gabriel's career. She grabbed it instantly. "This is Alexis." "It's Vale," said the tight voice of Colonel Adrian Vale, calling from the Pentagon. "He's in custody," Vale continued. "Local PD, St. Ridge." "What?" Alexis nearly dropped her glass. "On what charge?" "Unofficially." "None." "Officially?" "Suspicious activity." "But it's not what it looks like." "It never is," Alexis muttered, already opening her laptop and triggering her legal decryption protocols. "What's the threat level?" "High. Not just racial profiling. This smells like revenge. And old programs being reactivated." Alexis paused. Her fingers froze over the keys. "Obsidian?" Vale didn't answer. "I'm sending you a file. You'll have 3 minutes before it self-deletes. Midas is the drop point." Alexis straightened. Midas wasn't a person. It was a code name. A leak source. A rogue AI-assisted collective used by government insiders when traditional comms were compromised. "Understood," she said. "Lex," Vale's voice softened. "You should prepare." "For what?" Vale took a breath. "For a war none of us thought we'd have to fight again." Back in St. Ridge, Officer Haley Grant stared at the download bar on her laptop as it backed up body cam footage to a cloud account not linked to the department. The footage clearly showed Sergeant Red escalating the situation. No threats from Knox. No resisting. No probable cause. Just a gas pump and a black man who looked too calm and too competent for a town like theirs. Her hands trembled. What she was doing, copying evidence to a personal cloud, could cost her her badge. Maybe more. She noticed Red's folder still sitting on his desk. The same one Knox had clocked. She stepped closer. The emblem was more visible now, the black fence enclosing an officer's chevron, faint letters around it, SFN, OB, 47. She lifted her phone and quickly snapped a photo. Then, quietly, she backed away and returned to her desk, her ears burning with adrenaline. She didn't know what she was inside of. But she knew it wasn't policing. Back in D.C., Alexis opened the Midas secure drop. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dozens of documents, classified briefings, personnel files, redacted memos. A digital kill list. And in the center, Gabriel Knox's name, circled in red. Below it, a simple, chilling note. You don't erase a system without it trying to erase you first. Night fell over St. Ridge, but the storm had only just begun. Inside the small holding cell, Gabriel Knox sat upright, motionless on the steel bench. His expression was unreadable, eyes focused straight ahead, spine ramrod straight, like a soldier in parade rest. But behind the calm, his mind ticked through every threat vector, every contingency. The folder. The badge. The officer. The silence. The operation was old school, but the infrastructure around it was modernized corruption. The longer he sat, the clearer it became. Someone had resurrected Obsidian Fence. Not just as a concept, but as a coordinated strike plan. It wasn't enough to watch men like him. Now they were trying to erase them, digitally, reputationally, physically. He thought of Alexis. Of the red circle around his name. And of the men he'd once led, those still alive. He looked up at the camera in the corner of the cell. It was blinking. Recording. Still connected. He reached slowly into his inner pocket and withdrew his secured military phone. Not for calls this time. He activated the device's beacon ping, a coded signal that would bounce off select military satellites, encrypted beyond civilian interception. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. It was a code from decades ago. A simple phrase embedded in military-grade bursts. I am compromised. But not alone. For states away, in a dusty workshop behind a gun range in rural Tennessee, a phone buzzed on a workbench. William Steele Parson, a former staff sergeant who now ran a security training center, glanced at it. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. He stared. He hadn't seen that code in 20 years. Knox, he muttered aloud. Behind him, a younger vet training recruit stopped. You say something, boss? Parson didn't answer. He was already moving, unlocking a footlocker beneath his workbench. Inside, a stack of photos, a worn-out field journal, and a small velvet pouch. He pulled out a coin-sized patch of black fabric, a folded triangle embroidered with an Obsidian Fence symbol, the last remnant of their Black Ops unit, officially never existed. Knox had once shut them down. Had testified before military oversight committees. Some never forgave him. But now? Now, he'd called them back. Back at the motel room on Dunley Street, Officer Haley Grant sat with her laptop, decrypting more footage and sending it through an encrypted line to an address marked simply, justiceflag.anon at drop 9. Her pulse raced. She was already on borrowed time. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Pause. 2 more. She stood instantly, reached for the handgun she wasn't supposed to carry off duty. Who is it? A low voice answered. I'm the one you passed the note to. The door opened. Gabriel Knox stood there, calm, but different. Not a prisoner now. Not a detainee. A commander again. He stepped inside. You were right. I'm in something. And now so are you. She nodded. They suspended me after Red found spyware on his cruiser's dashboard. Someone tipped him off. He thinks it's me. He's right. What do you have? Knox asked. Grant opened a folder. Patrol schedules. Personnel profiles. And this. She slid over a USB. Surveillance. Red meeting with someone at Old Mill Crossing, every Tuesday, midnight. I ran facial scans on his visitor. Military build. Facial scar from right temple to jawline. Knox went cold. Tyran. In a dark parking garage in Arlington, Colonel Nash Tyran leaned against the hood of a black SUV. Across from him, Mayor Clark Buckley paced nervously. He made the call. Ravenfall. Do you know what that means? I know exactly what it means, Tyran said. It means he's scared. Buckley fidgeted. We didn't agree to this kind of exposure. Tyran handed over a flash drive. Inside, enough political blackmail to keep you elected until 2030. Grant approvals. Offshore wires. Photos of your opponent's donors at an illegal casino in Macau. Buckley snatched it, but Tyran held tight for a moment longer. When this breaks, and it will, your job is simple: pretend none of this ever touched you. You never met me. Never heard of Obsidian Fence. And Knox? Tyran lit a cigarette, his scar glowing under the garage light. Gabriel Knox ended my career. Now I end his life. The moon hung low over St. Ridge, casting silvery light onto its sleepy streets. But behind the curtains of quiet homes and flickering street lamps, a covert war was brewing. Inside a dusty motel room just 2 blocks from the police station, Gabriel Knox had turned a humble writing desk into a makeshift command center. A satellite map of the town was pinned across the wall, marked in red and blue dots: known surveillance points, probable safe houses, and the location of Old Mill Crossing. His military-issue laptop hummed with encrypted feeds. Printouts lay scattered: financial ledgers, procurement reports, and internal memos from defense contractors. Across from him stood 2 figures. Marcus Darnell, 49, tall, steel-eyed, a former reconnaissance chief who had followed Knox through both war zones and scandals. And Darius Holt, 51, shorter, broader, with the quiet precision of a man who'd once dismantled bombs blindfolded in Kandahar. They had come when the code was triggered. No questions. "Sir," Marcus said, "we cross-checked St. Ridge's municipal records. Guess what?" He dropped a folder onto the desk. "This town has received over $30 million in infrastructure grants in the past 3 years. But only a fraction shows up in actual civic improvements. Where's the rest?" Knox asked, though he already had a sinking suspicion. "Funneled into private security contracts, registered to shell companies. All tied, ultimately, to accounts once connected to, you guessed it, Tehran's South American front." Darius added, "They're moving money through rural towns, turning them into training hubs. St. Ridge isn't a coincidence, it's a staging ground." Knox paced slowly. "They're building something here," he said. "This isn't about me. It's about legacy. They're militarizing rural America under the radar." Suddenly, Knox's secure phone vibrated. A text. "No ID. Park bench. 3rd Street. 10 minutes. Alone. J. Officer Grant," Knox said aloud. Marcus frowned. "Sir, it's a trap." Knox shook his head. "Everything's a trap. But she's the best lead we've got." He reached for his jacket. The morning air was crisp. The streets were empty save for a few early joggers and a paperboy half asleep on a rusty bike. Knox walked alone, head low, eyes alert. 3rd Street Park sat on the edge of town, a forgotten patch of green with aging benches, a warped jungle gym, and a cracked fountain. Sitting on the far bench, partially hidden by a civilian jacket thrown over her uniform, was Officer Haley Grant. Knox approached and sat down, leaving 2 feet between them. "You're early," she whispered. "I always am." She slid a flash drive beneath the bench and nodded to it. "That's everything. Bodycam footage. Patrol rosters. Internal memos. More importantly, patterns. I cross-referenced radio logs. Sergeant Red meets with an unknown party every Tuesday night, just before midnight. Location, Old Mill. It lines up with surveillance dropouts." Knox took the drive without looking. "Why are you helping me?" Grant's jaw clenched. "My brother served in the 82nd Airborne. Came back shattered. PTSD. Alcohol. System failed him. But his CO didn't." Her voice softened. "That CO once told him about a man who never left anyone behind. Said he was the kind of officer that reminded you why the uniform mattered." She turned and looked him dead in the eyes. "Your name was Knox." She stood and walked away, leaving him frozen. Back at the motel, Alexis Knox appeared on a secure video line, her backdrop now a flurry of legal files, maps, and redacted intelligence memos. Standing beside her was Reggie Marlowe, 38, a tenacious investigative journalist who had once exposed military contract fraud in Libya, and who owed Knox a favor. Alexis spoke first. "We traced the money. St. Ridge is a laundromat. The mayor was broke 3 years ago. Now he has 3 offshore accounts, all tied to defense PACs and private intelligence networks." Reggie added, "They're hiring ex-military with disciplinary records. Giving them badges. No background checks. No oversight." Knox's mind spun with memory. 20 years ago. North Africa. A mission gone wrong. Intelligence gathering had revealed something darker. Tyran, then a colonel, had been leading a side-op, ethnic targeting masquerading as preemptive defense. He was trying to test the same protocol at home, Knox whispered. He wanted a racial purge, Alexis confirmed. He told me once I'd betrayed my country. That they promoted me to make a symbol, not a leader. And now? Reggie asked. Now he's building a militia, Knox said grimly. The woods surrounding St. Ridge whispered with early morning stillness, broken only by the crunch of leaves under careful boots. Gabriel Knox, Marcus Darnell, and Darius Holt moved like ghosts through the tree-line, their breath visible in the chill air. They followed coordinates provided by Officer Haley Grant, leading to a derelict stretch of land once used as a brick manufacturing plant during the Cold War. But it was no longer abandoned. Beyond the rusted fence line, Knox spotted movement, guards in tactical gear, rifles slung across their chests, patrolling the perimeter of what had become a covert training facility. That's not neighborhood watch, Marcus whispered. Darius adjusted his binoculars. Kevlar, real-time comms, military standard sidearms. These aren't locals, they're contractors. Tyran's building a private army. Knox remained silent, eyes fixed on the compound's infrastructure. Watchtowers. Sandbag positions. Obstacle courses. This isn't about vengeance anymore, he said quietly. He's preparing for war. And he's using this town to do it. His phone vibrated. Encrypted message. From Colonel Adrian Vale. Unauthorized biometric access detected inside DoD systems. Likely Tyran. He's compromised Pentagon-level clearance. Darius blinked. Jesus. He's not just building muscle. He's hijacked access. Knox turned his back to the scene and knelt. He has the back door to military infrastructure. This is an insurgency, with federal assets. They needed to move. Across town, Officer Haley Grant sat in an empty diner, earbuds in, laptop open. Coffee untouched. A voice crackled softly in her ear. Colonel Adrian Vale. You need to get out of town, officer. What you've accessed connects you to a compromised operation. Tyran has eyes everywhere. I'm not going anywhere, Grant said. Knox is in this because of us. I don't turn away. Vale paused. Do you know about Project Sentinel? Grant didn't answer. You need to. On her screen, a secure file began to load. Meanwhile, inside the Pentagon subterranean intel chamber, Vale stood before Admiral Kent, tablet in hand. Her eyes were tired. But her voice was steel. Project Sentinel was never shut down. She flicked to a list. 47 names. All minority officers. All marked, high observation. Kent's mouth tightened. The first name on the list. Knox, Gabriel, Tier Level 1 threat. Knox isn't a threat, Kent muttered. He's a patriot. No, sir. He's worse than a threat to people like Tyran, he's a symbol. Of reform. Of change. Of moral command. Kent stood slowly. Who authorized this? Not one person. Not one party. It was built into the system. Layer by layer. Quiet as dust. Back at the motel, Knox reviewed the footage Haley Grant had handed him. Patrol rotations. Payroll slips. Transfer schedules. A local network silently overtaken by ex-military operatives with flagged discharge records. Then he saw it. A grainy still frame. A dim hallway. And in it, Angela. She was bound to a chair, wrists cuffed, a bruise forming along her temple. Behind her stood a man with a scar cutting down the right side of his face. Tyran. The video was low-res, likely recorded from a closed internal feed. Then Tyran's voice crackled through. 6 hours. Come alone. Unarmed. Or your wife becomes the next symbol they bury. The screen went black. Knox clenched his fists. But he didn't tremble. He didn't scream. He looked over at Marcus and Darius. Call them, he said. Who? Marcus asked. Knox stared out the window at the dark horizon. Everyone who once believed in the oath, before the oath forgot them. Dawn broke over the ridge in streaks of silver and ash. Inside a weathered log cabin tucked deep within the western hills outside St. Ridge, Gabriel Knox stood before a large wall-mounted map, pushpins, thread lines, and handwritten notation stretching across the paper like a battlefield command center. Footsteps crunched on gravel outside. A knock. Then the door opened. A voice followed. Didn't think you'd call us back from the dead, General. Knox turned. William Steele Parsons stepped in first, tall, lean, and roughened by years spent training others to survive in situations that never made the news. A cane hung from his left hand, though he didn't seem to need it. Behind him came more ghosts. Joanna Whisper Lee, now 47, former intelligence officer and field shadow. Her eyes still held that hard-cut brilliance, as though she were always memorizing exits. Reyes, a wiry electronic warfare specialist who had disappeared from the grid 5 years ago after a whistleblower case went quiet. His fingers twitched constantly, too many firewalls burned into his muscle memory. And finally, Tasha Bryant, a former recon scout whose prosthetic leg made no noise when she walked. At 44, she still moved like a silent fuse, waiting to ignite. Knox took them in slowly. These weren't just veterans. These were survivors of a forgotten unit, the one he had been forced to disband when Obsidian Fence was uncovered. Some had been angry. Others had felt betrayed. But they came. Because the message was clear. The general needs you. No questions. No fanfare. Just purpose. The table was soon covered in documents, tablets, satellite prints, encrypted thumb drives. Knox outlined everything. Angela's abduction. Tyran's rise. The underground training compound. The unauthorized biometric backdoor into Pentagon systems. The movement of black-budget money into rural towns like St. Ridge. He ended with the map of the Barrett facility, once a military training ground, now Tyran's fortress. He's gathering them, Knox said. Discharged soldiers, contractors, extremists. Training them with military-grade precision. Giving them a sense of purpose, and a target. People like us. Reyes leaned forward. We talking rogue militia or state-sanctioned testing ground? Both, Joanna muttered. That's the beauty of it. It looks like chaos, but it's strategic collapse. Tasha studied the map. We're going in. Knox nodded. Tomorrow night. Tyran wants me alone. Unarmed. At Barrett. He'll be watching for a breach. Steele Parsons scoffed. And you're giving him what he wants? I'm giving him what he expects, Knox said. But while his eyes are on me, you'll be shadows. He turned to Joanna and Reyes. Disrupt his systems. Internal power grid. Comms hub. Surveillance feeds. To Tasha and Marcus, you hit the eastern tree line, breach from under the terrain wall. Find Angela. Get her out. To Steele, long range. 500 yards. Elevated overwatch. If this goes sideways, you end it. Parson nodded once. You trust me with that shot? I trust you more than I trust our government. The room was quiet. Knox stepped back and looked around the cabin at those who had once served under him in the shadows of U.S. operations. They were older. Angrier. But they still carried the discipline and scars that shaped them. I know some of you never forgave me for shutting us down, he said. But I did it because we were becoming what they feared, unaccountable, invisible, unchecked. I chose the mission over the unit. And now, we've got one more mission. He paused. Not for medals. Not for redemption. But for every officer who never got past lieutenant because they didn't look like the ones who wrote the rules. Steele raised his whiskey glass. Then let's rewrite the rules. Back in Washington, Alexis Knox clicked Encrypt on a 112-page legal dossier titled Project Sentinel, Authorization Chain Analysis and Civil Rights Violations Report. She uploaded it to 5 secure storage locations and linked it to a trigger, a dead man's switch. If Gabriel went dark for more than 4 hours, the world would know. She closed the laptop, pressed her hands together, and whispered to herself. You'd better come back, soldier. At 2:11 a.m., Gabriel Knox stood alone beneath the cold moonlight in the open lot of the Barrett facility, his coat zipped, hands empty. He walked toward the gate, just as he had 25 years ago, as a young captain full of honor. Now, he walked into a fortress controlled by his greatest adversary. The same man who once shared his barracks. The same man who had now declared war on everything they once swore to protect. Colonel Nash Tyran. The gates of the Barrett training facility creaked open without a word, just the low hum of servo motors revealing a path lit by floodlights. Gabriel Knox walked forward slowly, hands visible, eyes forward. No weapons. No backup in sight. But he was never truly alone. High above, in a ridge 2 clicks east, Steele Parson watched through a long-range scope, his breath shallow and timed. In the surrounding trees, Tasha, Marcus, and Joanna moved like disciplined shadows, communicating in silent gestures. And in a blacked-out SUV half a mile away, Reyes worked his magic, tapping into the compound's data grid via a drone that buzzed quietly overhead, barely visible against the dark sky. Inside the gate, Knox was met by 2 armed guards in matte black tactical gear, no insignias, no names, just silence and muscle. They frisked him roughly, checked his waistband, ankles, and boots. One of them retrieved the military ID from his inner pocket. General Knox, the taller one muttered, holding up the card to the security camera. Subject confirmed. Escort to Central Ops. Knox was walked through the main building, concrete corridors, decades-old banners, and peeling paint from the Cold War days. He recognized the training rooms. The armory. The mess hall. Places where soldiers were once taught duty and unity. Now, they reeked of distortion. He was led into a central command chamber, converted into a war room. Maps covered the walls. Strings and pins. Digital displays. Active drone footage of domestic targets, urban centers, federal buildings, protest marches. And standing at the center, arms crossed, scar glowing like a brand beneath a strip of light. Colonel Nash Tyran. Welcome home, Gabe, Tyran said, his voice both casual and cold. Wasn't sure you'd come. Knox didn't respond. He looked around the room. Every piece of tech screamed black budget. Where is she? Tyran smiled thinly. She's safe. For now. He motioned to a monitor. Angela Knox sat in a room across the compound, arms bound but upright, unafraid. A small cut across her brow. She's stronger than you give her credit, Tyran said. I never underestimated her, Knox replied evenly. Unlike you. Tyran walked in a slow circle around him. You know what I realized all those years ago, back in Kandahar? He asked. The system would always elevate men like you. Not because you were better, but because you were useful. The model soldier. Smart enough to win, obedient enough to stay in line. Black enough to parade, quiet enough to control. You mean I didn't share your thirst for unchecked power, Knox said. No, Tyran snapped. You didn't share my clarity. He stopped in front of the main screen, pulling up a new display. Dozens of photos filled the wall, faces of men and women in uniform, all officers of color. A digital dossier of rising influence across the U.S. military. These, Tyran said, are the ones we were told to monitor. You were the benchmark, Knox. The gold standard. You proved the algorithm worked. Knox stared at the screen. They turned us into test cases, he said. Then into threats. And now, Tyran said, stepping closer, we clean house. Miles away, inside a mobile command van, Colonel Adrian Vale watched the same feed. Reyes, what's the status? I've breached the secondary firewall. Internal comms are going dark in 90 seconds. Surveillance override in progress. Sending live extraction data to Tasha now. Joanna's voice cut through on encrypted channel. We've reached the lower barracks. Angela's room is 2 halls east. No movement yet. Vale turned to a junior analyst. Mark Tyran. If this goes sideways, I want a drone strike on his escape vehicle. Yes, ma'am. Back at Barrett, Tyran handed Knox a tablet. Before you leave, or die, you're going to record a confession. That you funneled military funds to radical groups. That your promotions were politically motivated. That you've betrayed your oath. And if I don't? Tyran smirked. Then she dies. And your legacy goes up in flames. Knox held the tablet for a moment. Then placed it down gently. You always misunderstood me, Nash, he said. You thought I was the puppet. He leaned in just slightly. But I wrote the protocol you're standing in. Tyran's face twitched. Knox spoke quietly. Obsidian fence folds at sunrise. The room froze. That phrase, obsidian fence folds at sunrise, was an ancient, internal kill switch. A phrase tied to an information deadman switch that would automatically release files to every major military, media, and congressional body if he didn't check in before dawn. Tyran's composure cracked. You wouldn't, he growled. I already did, Knox said. Suddenly, lights flickered. Alarms blared. Then went silent. Every screen in the room shifted, showing new footage. Angela Knox, escaping her room. Security feeds overwritten. Facility schematics being uploaded externally. Reyes' voice echoed across the compromised intercom. Surprise, assholes. Tyran lunged for his comms console, but the circuits were fried, overridden. He turned to Knox, enraged. You ruined everything. Knox stepped back. No. You did. Tyran reached for a pistol tucked behind the desk, but Knox was faster. The two men crashed into each other, fists flying, knocking over chairs, slamming against steel. Two soldiers who once stood shoulder to shoulder, now trying to end each other. And above them, the truth burned through every screen, broadcast to the world. Gunfire echoed through the Barrett facility. The battle had begun. While Gabriel Knox fought Colonel Nash Tyran in the main command center, the rest of the facility erupted into chaos. The compound's private guards, caught between confusion and malfunctioning security systems, scrambled to re-establish control. But it was too late. Knox's unit was already inside. In the southern corridor, Tasha Bryant and Marcus Darnell moved with tactical precision, clearing hallway after hallway. Their destination, the detainment block where Angela Knox was last seen. "Tango at 3 o'clock, Marcus whispered. Tasha responded with a single shot, non-lethal, center mass. The guard collapsed with a grunt. They reached the holding chamber. Angela was gone. "Tasha," Marcus said, pointing to the floor, zip ties cut clean, and a ventilation grate half loose. "She freed herself," Tasha smiled. Half a floor away, Angela Knox crouched inside a crawlspace lined with cabling and ancient ductwork. Dirt smeared her hands and forehead, but her eyes were sharp, tracking the blinking indicator on the bracelet Knox had given her years ago, military issue, updated with a secret comms chip. A subtle vibration pulsed against her wrist. 3 taps. Pause. 2. He's alive. She adjusted course. Back in the control room, the brutal hand-to-hand between Knox and Tyran escalated. Decades of battlefield experience collided. Tyran swung with heavy precision. Knox countered with tight, efficient defense. "You still think you're the hero?" Tyran spat, bleeding from the nose. "They gave you those stars because they needed a face for reform. Not because you earned it." Knox caught his wrist mid-swing. Twisted. Dropped him to a knee. "They gave me those stars," Knox said, voice tight, "because I earned loyalty, not obedience." He drove his elbow down across Tyran's shoulder, disarming him. Tyran lunged, desperate, toward the console. But the screen had already changed. Live feed. Hundreds of thousands of viewers. Military forums. Civilian media. Congressional inboxes. Obsidian Fence. Project Sentinel. Racial surveillance programs. The kill list. All of it, exposed. Outside, Steele Parson picked off perimeter guards one by one from 500 yards, covering the team's exit routes. His breath remained calm, measured. "Overwatch to whisper," he radioed. "You've got a convoy headed eastbound. 5 minutes. Looks like Tyran's failsafe." From her position near the facility's communications hub, Joanna Lee responded. "Copy. I'll plug the hole." She moved fast, laying EMP charges near the eastern gate. Angela emerged into the open courtyard just as Tasha and Marcus breached from the far side. They rushed her, covering all angles. "You good?" Marcus asked. Angela gave him a look. "Let's get the hell out of here." In the command room, Tyran, beaten, bloodied, cornered, slumped against the wall. "You'll never stop them all," he said, eyes wild. "You kill me, and 5 others take my place." Knox knelt beside him. "I'm not here to kill you, Nash." He activated a beacon on his comms. "I'm here to make sure you answer for everything. In court. In daylight. On the record." The doors burst open. Colonel Adrian Vale stepped in with a tactical response team, military insignias, badges visible, cameras recording. She nodded. "Colonel Nash Tyran," she announced. "You are under arrest for treason, unlawful detention, conspiracy, and crimes against military personnel. You will be remanded to federal custody immediately." Tyran laughed bitterly. "This is your victory?" "No," Knox said quietly. "Justice is." 3 hours later, as the sun broke across the ridge, the Barrett facility stood silent, its corridors scorched, its secrets dragged into the light. Angela stood beside Gabriel outside the gates. "You look like hell," she said softly. "I've had worse briefings," he replied. They both turned to see the press helicopters circling, the federal convoys rolling in, the Justice Department officials arriving to document the collapse of a conspiracy that had thrived in the dark for decades. In the distance, a new dawn was rising. 3 weeks later, the chaos had quieted, but the shockwaves continued to roll across the country. Headlines screamed of betrayal at the highest levels. Congress launched emergency hearings. Military branches scrambled to conduct internal audits. And across countless screens, one phrase burned like a wound reopening. Project Sentinel, the quiet purge. In a modest Senate hearing room in D.C., General Gabriel Knox sat straight in uniform, 3 stars shining against his chest, despite the bruises that hadn't yet faded. Beside him, Angela Knox in a navy blue suit, represented both counsel and conscience. And on his other side, Colonel Adrian Vale, no longer whispering behind intelligence walls, now testifying openly, fiercely. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. Senator Travis Alcott, a once skeptical member of the Defense Oversight Committee, looked up from the documents in his hands. These files, he said slowly, show a decades-long campaign to monitor, suppress, and undermine the advancement of minority officers, under the guise of readiness and loyalty tracking. He glanced at Knox. "You were target number 1. Knox met his eyes. "I wasn't the only one," he said. "And that's why I'm here." That night, Knox didn't stay in a hotel. He drove instead to a lakeside cabin in rural Maryland. The same place where he once fished with his uncle as a boy. Now, it served as a quiet sanctuary. There, waiting for him, were the ones who had helped pull him through. Tasha Bryant, newly appointed advisor to the Joint Special Operations Equity Board. Marcus Darnell, offered reinstatement but choosing to train a new generation of tactical officers. Joanna Lee, recruited by Homeland Security to root out domestic extremism. Steele Parson, who turned down all contracts and went home to Tennessee, content to watch the sun rise without a rifle in hand. And Reyes, who now ran a private cybersecurity firm exposing government backdoors, legally, this time. They ate dinner by firelight, the smell of charcoal and oak in the air. Knox raised his glass. To those who stayed quiet to protect the system, and to those who finally shouted to save it. Glasses clinked. The next day, Angela handed Knox a manila envelope marked, "Confidential, Federal Response Team." "Don't open it unless you're ready," she warned. Inside, a formal offer. Appointment as Director of National Defense Ethics. A new position. One created out of necessity, shame, and hope. Knox stared at it in silence. "Do I want to be the guy who cleans up the mess?" he muttered. Angela smiled softly. "You were never here to make them comfortable. You were here to make them accountable." He folded the letter. "Then let's begin." Across the country, reforms began. Promotion boards were overhauled. Anonymous reporting channels became standard. And Project Sentinel was publicly denounced as unconstitutional and dismantled, its architects removed, its survivors compensated. But for Knox, the real victory wasn't legislative. It came in letters. From junior officers he'd never met. From cadets who watched the hearings and whispered, "Maybe now I've got a shot." And from families of those who never made it through the glass ceiling. One final package arrived weeks later. No return address. Inside, a folded scrap of paper. "You failed because you fought for your anger. I won because I fought for people. When you remember what the oath really meant, I'll be waiting. G. Knox." The recipient? Nash Tyran. In federal prison. Alone. He read the letter twice. Then tore it in half. And sometime later that night, taped it back together. Green Square core values learned from the story. 1. Justice is not automatic, it must be fought for. Although Gabriel Knox is a respected 3-star general, he was humiliated, handcuffed, and threatened simply because of his race and the threat he posed to a broken system. The story reminds us that honor doesn't protect you from injustice, and that even those sworn to defend the Constitution can become its victims. 2. Silence is the ally of corruption. If Knox had stayed silent, if Officer Grant hadn't risked everything to upload the footage, if Angela hadn't unlocked the classified data, Obsidian Fence would have remained a ghost in the system. But they broke the silence. And that was the first step in reclaiming justice. The enemy was silence. The final line of the story isn't just a conclusion, it's a manifesto. 3. Power doesn't come from rank, it comes from trust. Knox didn't save the system with weapons. He saved it with moral clarity and by standing firm even when betrayed, arrested, and attacked. The story delivers a message for all leaders. Authority comes from rank. Leadership comes from trust. 4. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. When Knox rescued the very man who kidnapped his wife, Nash Tyran, from a collapsing facility, he didn't do it out of weakness. He did it because he refused to become the thing Tyran wanted him to be. We don't leave anyone. Not even him. Yellow Square lessons for us, as viewers, readers, and citizens. Compass question what is right, even if it means standing alone. Like Officer Grant, Reggie, Angela, and Knox, you may sometimes have to stand alone to do what's right. But courage always begins with one voice. Balance scale justice needs systems, but more than that, it needs ethical people within those systems. Laws are tools. But without people of conscience, laws are lifeless. Dove when one person speaks out, many are set free. Knox was only one man. But through his courage, he unlocked a path forward for dozens, maybe hundreds, who had once been silenced or sidelined.